I am grateful to be here with all of you. I hope you all are well. And I'm super excited to do this with you today. We are going to work through whatever things happen because I'm sure you've learned by now that in the virtual world, things don't always go as you expect. And so I will ask for grace now for any of those things that should come up. Also, I do have a 3-year-old. He is in the same house as me right now. So I will also ask for grace if he should burst in and scream my name. So good morning again. Thank you so much to Good Work Network. Hermian entire team is amazing and I'm super happy to be back here with you. So we're gonna get right into why we're here. I am not a big, this is who I am and this is what I'm about kind of person. And so my own introduction of who I am will be very, very brief because you did not come for that. So let's jump right into the goals. Now, just to answer a commonly asked question, all the things that Hermian said they're completely true. I do own a marketing firm. There are 4 people who are on my team. They are the actual people that make it happen. I just kind of guide the ship for the most part, and I'm grateful for them. But today, what I want to focus on is these 3 goals for the most part. Understand how to effectively build a virtual process that gives current clients a pleasant experience, which of course we already have clients for a lot of us in our virtual service-based firms, and offer a stable experience to new clients, which is the growth portion of it. The second thing we want to do is to identify what tools your process needs to be effective. Now, I know that there's always a ton of questions around tools, and then especially what I use personally, and we will kind of get into that. I'm going to leave that to the Q&A portion to see how deep you want to know. And then the third goal I have for today is that we learn to market the new and improved process to maximize profit. Now, we are scheduled to be here about 2 hours. And if you have registered, which that would be the only way that you're here, I'm not sure if we're broadcasting, but there was a workbook that was sent to you. If you had a chance to print that out, then great. If you have not, that's fine. Or if you don't have it or did not see that link, that's also completely fine. I will be putting up a couple screenshots of those things so that if you have a notebook or something you can write on to help you kind of jot your notes in real time, that will be very, very helpful. There will even be times that I want to pause and allow you to think about it, because if you have questions in that moment, I would like to answer a few of those questions in that moment about that thing. So lest we get too far and we all are all over the place. So let's start with the kind of straight to the point, right? Why does this matter? And you clearly see value in it because you're here with me, and thank you for being here. But let's talk about the internal reason why it matters. So of course, any process being in place gives us an elevated level of organization. And that organization matters for, especially if you're trying to scale or if you're already a larger business, it's really important to be organized. If you want to bring people into your process, if you're thinking about hiring, then you cannot hand people your, oh, I forgot to do that process, or lack thereof. And then of course there's efficiency. You know, we spend money on time, and time is money. And if that's all really the case, then are we actually being efficient with our work? And how do we know that if we are not going by a process? We can't create any measurable thing to determine that if that's the case, or if it's not the case, if we don't have a process there. Also, processes internally really help with time management. And this is something that's very personal to me because as a CEO of a small firm, a lot of the work still is on my to-do list. I would like to be that CEO who sits on the very top floor and just all of the people below me get all the work done. That is not my testimony. So time management is very, very important for me to do the CEO things, and then to also sit down and be a social media manager when I need to be, or be an email marketer when I need to be. And so having a process in place allows me to be able to see the future, see what's coming down the pipeline, see where I need help if that's the case, and properly manage my time so that I can be on time with the work for my clients, for myself. And similar to organization, and I was talking about if you're hiring or if you plan to hire, training people to come in and take over a project for you or take over a job or a task for you is very difficult without process. And I know that as people grow in their businesses, you kind of find that there's always something that you know to do, or the people who are already working with you just kind of know to do, but you've never sat down and written that out step by step because we just know what to do. So if you do plan to train anyone at any point in your business, having a process that you are working on to make it efficient is so important. So that's for us. And we are very, very important to the topic of processes. Our firms, the services that we provide, and if you're B2B, there are other businesses who are certainly leaning on you to do your part. And so it's really important that the internal value of that is recognized. Now, on the other side, on the external side, what processes do for us is give us a level of professionalism. You know, as people go through it, and you think of yourself as a consumer, think about your own process when you're engaging a company. And for anything, it doesn't have to be a professional service. It could be for any type of service. It could be for personal service. You know, there was a time that we all went out and got our hair done and our nails done and haircuts, and there were no restrictions. And so how people handle that process of servicing us gives us a level of professionalism. It tells us how we should expect to be engaged, how we should interact. And sometimes it speaks to the cost. Sometimes, depending on how professional and together a thing is presented, we feel like, just as human beings, that there's more value there, that we're willing to pay more money because this is so together. So professionalism comes from good processes. Also, this is an akin to professionalism. It creates the experience that you want to create for your audience. Now, getting the service done is what you're supposed to do. The experience that they have being stellar is what you should be doing. Both things don't have to happen for you to be successful. However, you likely will be more successful if you can get your finger on both things. So user experience, and a lot of people think of user experience in the technical way. When they use my web application or when they use my app, I want them to have this type of user experience. There is an entire science behind user experience for digital purposes, for technology purposes. But today, we are focusing on the experience for our clients, our customers, as they engage and interact with us. Also, processes matter because competition is out there. And if you are offering professional services and any service, you know, I keep saying professional because I'm in a business setting, but if you're offering services, whether that's B2B or B2C, someone is likely offering that exact same thing. And if they are, the question is, what makes you different? And we'll get into that kind of in a little more detail. But your competition may do a great job in the service itself, but they may do a horrible job in how they get people to that end result. And so it can become a competitive advantage that you have a great process. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little while. Also, externally, processes absolutely matter to advancing your relationships. You are able to connect more dots. You're able to bring more people to you. And if the experience is good for your client, they are likely to tell someone else. And this is where we get in the sales funnel world of things into loyalty and advocacy. I have gone through your process. Not only did I get a great product out of it, not only did I get the thing that I was paying for, but this experience was something that I have got to tell people about. And that does not happen often without great processes. Now, none of this is to say that you aren't able to make people feel great about working with you without some clearly defined, you know, step. Of course you can, because you're awesome and you're wonderful. So clearly you can. However, if it's not repeatable and if people are getting different versions of the process, then that's not something that you can think of. A comment thread on social media. When someone says, oh, this was my experience, and somebody goes, that was my exact experience. Oftentimes we see that mostly with the bad stuff. I sent an email and they never got back to me. Oh my God, me too. That happened to me 6 months ago. And suddenly there is a thread of trash talking and it's just bad for the brand. But if you can think of that in the positive way and say, if someone were to start a comment thread and say, wow, I got this service and it was great, but really the experience, how I went through it, it was so easy. It was clear. I knew what to do. That felt so good to me. It made me feel better about what was happening. If someone came behind them and said, me too, that happened to me too. That's exactly how mine went. Imagine how powerful that is for future clients and for your current clients. So they absolutely matter. So here we are in a time where we do have to kind of pause and ask ourselves the question, how has my process been affected? Now, here, and I want to just put this in perspective. When you're thinking about building your process, yes, right now we have the thought of pandemic to consider, but this could be for any purpose. Now, some of these are exactly what we're going through right now. But if for some reason, when you get a replay of this, you decide, okay, pandemic has calmed, we've gotten to a new normal. But the question is, did something else happen to cause my process to shift or change? And so though today we may focus on pandemic because that is our current life, it's important to remember that many things can affect your process. So for us, face-to-face interaction is what we used to do, right? It's not as common as it used to be. And so saying, hey, schedule your appointment, come in, sit in my office, closer than 6 feet, like that's just not something that we're really even for some places legally allowed to do. So face-to-face interaction has taken a hit. Document handling, if you are the type of business that requires people to send you documents, sign documents, and you've normally been doing that by hand, which is not uncommon, then absolutely it's possible that your document handling has been affected. Now, also, and I see the chat box jump up. And so if you see me pause, it's me pausing to be nosy and see what's going on. Also, onboarding, as you think about your new clients or even new employees, your onboarding may have been hit very hard if you're a new employee or your new client can't come in and receive that t-shirt that you got for them and the mug and all those things that you may have put time and energy into creating may be broken because of all that's in place, all of the restrictions that we're dealing with. And then also one of the biggest things is that now everyone is online. Now you thought everyone was online before this. Now we know for sure there's almost no way around the fact that everyone is online. And that creates the most saturated digital space we have ever seen in our lives. Because the last time our country was in pandemic, there was no internet. So it could not have been the case. And so now we find that everyone has found their way into social media platforms, into Googling things. YouTube is numbers are crazy as people look for activities to do with their children or DIY things to help themselves because they can't go and live their regular lives. And so we find that everyone is online and it becomes increasingly more difficult for businesses to compete, for businesses to stand out. And that was already the case. Like that's not a new problem, but certainly the waves have gotten a lot bigger. We maybe were in a rocky situation. Now we're in more of a tsunami when it comes to digital space. And that's not to discourage you. Let me just say that. That's to say that please be aware that if you're online, if you're moving your process more virtual, so is your competition. So is anyone who is maybe not as big as you are or as far in the journey as you are. And so are those who are legions ahead of you. Everyone is forced to look online. Also, technology can be a huge learning curve, and that can affect your process. If you decide to have your meetings virtually or do all of these things in a more virtual and digital space, we do absolutely find that your clients or your customer base, they may not be familiar with that. And that becomes a true issue for how you're able to build and go forward. So if you did have the downloadable workbook, this is the first page. And again, if you don't have that, that is absolutely not a problem. But what I do want you to do is, if you have not grabbed a pen or a piece of paper or something that you can write on to kind of jot how you feel about this. And the first question that I put here was to kind of evaluate your process. And we have to start with kind of a baseline assessment. And this is very, very simple, just a space for you to brain dump what's happened. Those things that were in the previous slides, yes, they all, I'm sure, apply to kind of everyone. But the truth of the matter is that all of our processes are very different. How we have been handling things is very, very different. And so I want you to take a moment and just determine, how has my process been affected? Both internally, is my team feeling that? Do I, is there something that a tool that I was using, like all of these things that have happened that have caused you the drama and the stress? Brain dump those things onto this worksheet page. And then of course the bottom asks the exact same question, but externally. How has this affected maybe my relationship with my audience, my relationship with my clients, or how people are getting to me externally? What are the pains that I'm feeling? And it's important, again, though you may know them because you feel them, if you don't write them down and be able to point to them and say, this is a problem that I need to fix, it's very difficult to fix the problem. I can say all the time, there's a crack in the foundation of my home. That does not help someone who has come to fix it if I don't say the crack is right here. Can you go to this spot and fix it? So please do take a moment to really just evaluate where you are and how all of this has affected your ability to service your audience and your ability to maintain organization within, right? So I won't dwell there because I do feel like that may take you a little bit of time. So we will press on. Now, when we think about building the process, right? So whether your process has been affected or you are here because you kind of just need to establish a process. And this can be the case for not only your business as a whole, but maybe it's just for certain services. And as a service-based business owner, I think it's very important to remember that every service that you offer has its own kind of process. Yes, you want to be able to take everyone through, this is how we do it at step 1 and step 2 and step 3 and step 4. But if step 2, for instance, for me, is website design, or it could be social media management, that step cannot look the same. And so you end up with multiple types of processes. So whether you are here to kind of evaluate what you already have in place, or build something because you don't have something in place, or maybe add something because one thing has a great process, but everything else is floating around in its own happiness. All of these things to be considered for what your goal is to accomplish today. So when we think about building your process externally, we have to consider the customer or client journey. And what that means is when they come across who you are, right? How does that start and how do you want it to end? And that's a very, very important thing to consider. If you do not draw a map for that, and as that last bullet point says, mapping that journey is really, really important. If you don't know what that map is, if you don't know as a service provider, you cannot expect your audience to find their way. And I say this in everything that I do. Every time I talk about marketing, it is my soapbox moment. So prepare yourselves. It is not your audience, your customer's job to come find you and take advantage of your service and give you their money. It is your job as a business owner, as a service provider, to get in their way, make them giving you their money so easy that it falls out of their hand. That's your job. That's not their job. It is not their job to come to your site and find the call to action. It is your job to put it front and center. And so you have to remember, when you're thinking about your customer, it's your job to draw that map for them. They click here and then they do what? Where does that take them? What questions do they need to answer? And that's really, really important to consider. Also, in the same lane there, what calls to action do you really need? And that's something that as you build that process, you have to decide. And we're going to go through the worksheet pages that help you think through this a little better. Also, how do we make those clear? How do we make sure that people see them, they're in the right places? And these are questions we have to answer when we think about building this for the front facing portion, right? This is for them. This is not for us, because we know whether we've written it down, gotten it automated, we still know what's supposed to happen. Your audience does not know that, and that's not their job. And then what channels hold those call to action? Is it your website? Is it your social media presence? Is it an actual physical document? Is it something that's on your business card? What marketing channels or what spaces do you need to hold those call to actions to make sure that they're clear, they're visible, and your audience understand what the next step is? So then, like I said, it's your job to map that journey. So let's take a look at this, the second and third pages of our worksheet here. And what I've done here, and I did go in and just design these myself, because when I think through my own, again, as a service-based business, this is right up my alley. I've done this process for myself multiple times. And I will be very transparent in saying sometimes it has worked wonderfully. Other times it has taken me 5 and 6 times to kind of get it right. So we look here and we see like step 1, and this is asking, what's the entry point into this process? And so that's what your step 1 is going to be. And again, we're thinking external. We're not thinking about your team, yourself, and what you're doing in your office. We are simply thinking about the person who comes across your marketing channel. What is their first step? Is it a scroll on your website? Is it a Google search? Is it an event? You know, when we used to be able to do those in person, or it could be a virtual event. At what point do they enter, you know, step foot into your territory and begin this journey with you? That's what goes in step 1. Now, a frequently asked question, and I'm not going to wait for this question to come up because I hope that you have it. What if I have multiple step 1s? Of course you have multiple step 1s. You should duplicate this page and draw a journey for each one. However, if you feel like I can have multiple step 1s, but they still kind of all need to go to the same step 2, that's fine also. This is very, very specific to your life, your business, the type of service that you are offering. There is no wrong answer, okay? So step 1, here's where they, you know, get to me and where we begin our journey together. And then here in the middle, you'll see that there is a call to action. Now, what I recommend is that you go on and go through the steps first. Step 1, we go here. Step 2, what happens next? This might be an appointment. It might be a form that they have to complete. This could be a variety of things. But what do I need them to do next? And I would go through those steps until I get, and there's a page that has like blank steps in case yours gets to like step 45. I did not want to limit you because you have limitless possibilities. But a short process is a great process. Let me say that as a consumer. Please do not drag me on forever. Now, so build your steps first. That's my recommendation for going through this. And then go back and decide. I like to call to action bridges. How do you make sure that you're building bridges from one step to the next? See your steps as islands, you know, of paradise, of course, not, you know, scary islands, but build these wonderful islands of wonderful experience, but they're island hopping. So how do you get them to the next island? This is your bridge to that. What do I have to say or tell them to do? Or where do they have to click? What has to happen that I can say, hey, you wonderful person who has decided to spend your time with me, this is how you get from this wonderful island to the next island so that I can further help you and be of great service. So you go through and decide, what is that call to action? Do I say buy now? Do I say learn more? Do I say click here, fill out this form? What do I join my email list? What do I have to say here to get them going through that journey? Now, this takes time. Again, we kind of all are familiar with what our process is. This is not a workshop that teaches you to build something that you likely have never done before. Sure, you know what it is, but have you ever had to explain it to someone as though they speak a foreign language? That's what this is about, is breaking down every single small step. So it can be a little tedious, but you hang in there, it matters. So we go through that, we build our external process. Here is where they're going. And I wanted to give you kind of an example of something that I've used or that I currently use. And this is what it can turn into. And we'll talk later about, where you need to use that in your process. But similarly, take a look at this. I know from my website development process. And so if for any of you are considering that, this is what your journey would look like. We have a discovery meeting and it gives us brief description. And again, this is front facing. This is for my audience. So if they say, oh, you do website development, that's wonderful. It's so great to meet you. I need a website. Of course you do. Everyone needs a website. Here is the process. You're going to have a discovery meeting. And then once I have a good idea of what it is you need, I'm going to send you a proposal or estimate, right? And then in step 3, you're going to accept that. Let me put a pin here and say, when you are explaining to your audience what the journey is, do not feel dirty for saying one of these steps includes you giving me money or includes you signing a contract, right? That's okay. That is a valid step in the process. So let me give you permission to do that right now. Step 4, we're going to have a content strategy and needs identification discussion. We're going to talk about what it is that you need to do in order to make this work. And then we're going to go through and have a framing design discussion. And once we've done that, I'm going to deliver the first draft. And so you get the point, right? I don't have to read this all the way through to you, but this is kind of what you're building. It's the first step in building this. I had to first understand what the external journey was in order to get to this document. Now, it doesn't go straight from the last slide and then go straight from here to this. There are a couple other steps in between because of course I had to go in and define what this looks like. This does not at all speak to the calls to action. This is simply me mapping out, and the purpose for this for me is so that people understand what journey they're about to take. So you may love talking to me, think I'm great, you want to work with me, but I need you to understand where we're going so that I can manage expectations. And as service-based, service providers, we all understand that managing expectations for an intangible product can be very difficult. And this helps me do that. And that's why processes matter. So this says to my audience, I hope that I've thought about it. I know where you're going. I want you to understand where you're going. I also kind of don't want you to ask me about step 9 while we're on 3. So let me give you the map so that you will not say, well, when will you put the words in, right? Our process can be, and defense is a horrible way to say this, right? It's a horrible way. So if you're giggling to yourself, I'm giggling to myself. It's a horrible way to say, we use our process as defense, but we kind of do. Because in service industry, what we find is that because people don't know, and again, it's not their job to know, but because people don't know what's happening or when it will happen, we find ourselves fielding the many questions or the many emails and all of that because they're like, so far ahead, they're looking for the result, not knowing it takes 10 steps or it takes 45 steps or it takes 3 steps. They don't know that. They only know I'm paying for a service. When will I get the end result? This process and laying that out for them helps me to say, hey, it's going to be, 10 steps before you can drive off into the sunset. Please exercise patience and grace as we work through every step. And that helps set and manage expectations. Now, also in mapping that journey, this is also a way for you to think about it in a more visual sense, right? So here we're talking about what we want them to do, but this is another good way to just draw this. And if you have multiple channels or if you have multiple services, this is kind of a quick way to go through that. I want to say they're going to start at Instagram and then they're going to go to a blog post that I posted. And then from that blog post, they're going to say, oh, it says here I can join the email list. And then they're going to join the email list and I'm going to know where they came from because I have a specific lead page just for that, all those fun things. And so you can map that out in this way as well if it helps you understand what your audience is doing. Now, another way to use this page that I want to point out, in the effort to try to get in people's way, sometimes you need to map out what they're doing when they're not interacting with you. And that's another reason why I wanted to include this page. When we think about marketing to our audiences, we often assume that they're going to just run into us, and that's just not a fact. So if I'm thinking about my target audience, if I've defined them very well, And I know that they spend time on Facebook, or let's say LinkedIn. They spend time on LinkedIn. What else do they do with their day? Where else do they go in this process? Maybe this will identify for me which platforms make the most sense. Maybe this will identify for me opportunities that I have to run certain kinds of ads or whatever. So you can use this both in this is my map of my things, or you can say this is kind of what I think they're doing, so that I can see if their journey in any way can overlap with my journey. And so there are two ways that you can use that. Now, if you're taking notes, I talk really fast, and you want to take a moment and think about that, I am very, very happy to pause and ask if there are any current questions while you think about that. So this is my intentional pause to see if you have any questions while you think about that. If not, I will press on. If I see the little box go crazy, then I will come back to it. Now, a commonly asked question is, what then is the difference between a customer journey and a funnel? The answer to that is the customer journey, the one that we're building, this process, assumes they have already kind of made a commitment to us. This is about their journey of experience with us as a client. A funnel speaks to, how do I get them to be a client? So there is no commitment there. So if you're thinking to yourself, oh, it's a sales funnel, it's not a sales funnel. I promise it's not. A sales funnel is going to absolutely create way more like, I need a lead page. I need a follow-up here in this way. I need HubSpot. I need CRM. That's what your funnel is going to do. What does that lead page need to say? What does it need to look like? Your customer journey is about how they interact with you once they have made a commitment. So I did want to pause and make sure that was understood. Now we're going to flip to the inside. Now I do see a lot of people are asking, how do you get the workbook? All of that information was in the Zoom information, but it also, as I understand, will be provided afterwards. So just so that you know, it is there. If you want to pull it up, I will not feel offended if you move away from the screen to go grab it. Now let's think about internally. Let's think about, we thought about how it looks to them, right? What steps we want to communicate to them. Now let's think about ourselves and permission to be selfish, because none of this works without thinking about ourselves. Consider what's ideal for you. Now, you know what you do. You do it very well. I know you do, because you're awesome. We've talked about that. But what's ideal for you? Doing a service well because you have the skill and having an ideal work process are not the same thing. This question is more about the promised land of your process. What works for you? And that's important for you to figure. That's a soul searching moment as a service provider. And for a long time, again, and being very transparent, I hadn't thought about that. I had been living more on okay, that's what you need. So cool, I'll provide that for you. And I'm just going to do it because I know it needs to be done. I'm not going to really stop and think about how I do it. I'm just going to get it done. That is the majority of us as small business owners, organizations, but also just as people. That's what you need. Okay, we're very reactive, but pause for a moment and just dream. What's ideal? If this went perfectly, what is perfect? What does that look like? What does it feel like? And feelings in business are welcome, but this is one of those times to understand what's ideal for the purpose of managing not only my time and my resources, but my stress level. Having emails pop up with complaints or issues or always having to put out fires often is a side effect of having broken processes. So what is your ideal work process? When you get a new client, what's the perfect scenario for you? Now, the step after that is, once you've drawn this beautiful picture of what that looks like, and it looks like paradise, what questions do you need answered in order to move that process forward? Now, this to me has been something that was very, very life-changing for me to pause and consider. I know what the journey is. I've built that. Here is what I need you to do, what I need you to do. But what I did not do in the mapping of that journey is understand at each step what's happening on the other side and what answers do I need in order to move forward effectively. Which brings us to another worksheet page. Now, I didn't even put the numbers on this one because I was sleepy when I put the first 1 through 5. I should have left them all blank. But here we are. So we decide, and now also the other reason I did that was because maybe all your steps don't have a need to know. Maybe it's just like step 4, step 7, step 13, and maybe you use it like that. I wouldn't necessarily say put step 1, nothing. That's a waste of ink. So here we are in a particular step. The question is, what do I need to know from my audience for my work process in order to move forward? Now, I will give you an example. This is my client discovery form that we use internally. That's why it's not pretty, by the way. As a marketer, I feel very offended that I'm putting this up in a presentation, but it is internal and the people who work with me don't need to be wowed. You are just getting it because I think you're great and deserve to see it. Now, this helps me guide what questions I need to know kind of on a very basic level to get the conversation started during discovery. And so for me, going back a page, this for me is step 1. If you remember the process I showed you, just sticking with the website development example. Step 1 is that discovery meeting. And here are the things I need to know. And that's how this document was developed. Now, again, I have multiple, this says marketing strategy, marketing strategy, marketing strategy. In the real world, this is a drop-down menu that has marketing strategy, website development, email marketing. It has different things. And you'll find that further down this form, I have website information, and then I have social media information because I use the same form for all of those services. But again, this is a guide for myself and for whoever's doing their discovery meeting. If I hire someone to be an account liaison or a sales representative, we can all use the same form. So I need to know a couple things. Who are you? Who's a person that I will be communicating with regularly? What services are you looking for? And when are you trying to have it done by? And this is a very important question. When people come to you, it is always a pressing need. Anyone, I can't see you raise your hands and testify, but I feel sure that if you were to testify, you would say, yes, every time someone needs my service, they need it yesterday. That's a very common thing with professional services or service in general. And so you want to ask, when were you thinking that this would work? Or when were you thinking that your website would be done? And that's important to be able to, I see some people in the comments going, yes, I know it because it happens to me all the time. And as a consumer, you know, I do it too. But sometimes what I found for myself is that in my discovery meetings, I would neglect to ask that. I would be so busy wrapped up in the details that I would neglect to ask, well, pause, what is your expectation? What are you looking to accomplish? Because answering that third or fourth may end the conversation. If you say, well, I really wanted my website to be ready for May 1st. Well, today is April 30th, 29th. Today is April 29th. I can't make your website in 2 days. I can, it will be trash because I just don't have the hours to do that. So maybe already there is work to be done that I can recognize. And that's why understanding what I need to know in this step is so important. So who's the person that's doing it? Contact information for them, very simple. But then here's some other things for my process that I realized I kind of need to know for everything. Do you already have a logo? Do you have brand colors? Do you already have a style guide? If this is website, do you currently have a website? So that helps me understand if I'm looking at a new project completely, or if this is kind of a renovation or a redo or refresh or whatever. And this leads me to other questions. If you already have a site, are you trying to stay in the same site? Are you just trying to freshen up a couple pages? And that leads me to other things. Or do you have hosting? Do you already have a domain? All these very simple things that we think we know to ask. Sometimes we need that guide. And sometimes the people who are working with us or for us also need that guide. So going back here, we have my step 1 discovery meeting, all the things I need to know, the tool, and this is the part that I had not addressed yet, The tool that I need for this step is just a form, right? Something very simple. It's a fillable form. That's also important because my team has always worked remotely. So my life has not changed drastically other than workload. But because we are so virtual and because we are connected in different ways, I needed this to be a form that we can fill out, upload to Dropbox real quick, and keep it moving. So as we go down here again, these are all kind of similar questions and things that we're asking to make sure that we have gone for it. Now, I can see that there was a question. I have to wait till the box pops back up. All right, so further in the internal process, you want to think about what you are currently using. Now, for some of us, maybe you already have a form in place. Maybe you already have lead pages in place. Maybe you already have some type of CRM that you're using. But again, we have to kind of set a baseline evaluation of what tools we're using for our processes in the first place. Now, keep in mind, your process that you're considering may be partially virtual at this point, or maybe partially digital at this point. Maybe it has never been digital. So again, we may be in different places in how we're approaching this. So what tools are you currently using, right? Think about that. And if you've never made a short list of all the types of tools that you pay for, I challenge you to do so. As a digital marketing firm, every tool I use is on a computer. There are very few things that I can walk into an office supply store and say, oh, I need that thing. Very, very uncommon for me, even though I love a good notebook. That's about it. And then the question is, why do you use that tool? What purpose does it serve for the process? And this is to help you understand, is this actually an effective tool for me? Because then the question is, which one of these things overlap? Are there things, and this is what we're kind of trying to vet, is are there things that all kind of mean the same thing? Are they doing the same thing? Am I paying for tools I don't need, or am I just using tools? Because whether you spend money or spend time, you're spending something. If there's overlap, that means that you're being inefficient in the process. I'm going to pause because there was a question, and Hermione is being wonderful by sharing those with me. So let's see here. I have a question that says, as an education consultant, I do a student assessment. Does the client fill out this form that I shared as an example on their own, or do I fill it out while interviewing the client? Great question, and I'm glad that I paused to answer that, because then I can just go back one. Again, this is my internal form. This is one that my team uses. It's very possible that for your step, because what I did not do is go a step further in this, but the step before, actually, step 0 for me maybe, internally, is when people set up for discovery meetings, I ask questions there. So I use Calendly for people to self-schedule. And in that Calendly, I have that process. I have the opportunity to ask a couple questions. They fill that out to give me just a general idea of what we're about to talk about, so that I don't get on the phone or get on Zoom or any video platform and I just don't know what's about to happen. That's a very uncomfortable feeling. So they have a couple things that I get them to tell me. This form that I've shown is one that I fill out, or the team member who's talking to them fills out while they're having the conversation. So in real time, this would sound something like, hey, so it's great to meet you. I'm so glad that you have decided to chat with me. I want to get some basic information up front so I can start your file with our firm. Can you just remind me of your business name? And likely I already have that. Your business name is this. Awesome. Will you be the person that I'm talking to most about this, or are there other team members that maybe we might have to talk to? So I can get that information. That gives me an idea of how many people have to decide on a yes. So that's very self-serving. And this guides me. And so you said you were interested in marketing strategy. Awesome. Were there any other services? And I asked that question on the front end, but in case they did not take time to fill that out, I want to make sure I still have all the information that I need, because again, I took time to figure out what I needed internally to make it go forward. They needed just to make the appointment. the information I asked may not be as valuable to them. And so because of that, they may not be thinking, hey, let me go ahead and click all these boxes. They're just here. They're just, whatever. I need that information. So I'm going to make sure I'm asking it here. So this is what I'm filling out as I'm talking to people. It's internal. People rarely see that. And again, you all are seeing it because you're here. It's not cute. So people don't usually see it. All right. Now, let's see here. I see another question here about what I suggest to create a secure form to collect sensitive personal information. That's going to vary. And when we get to tools, I'll talk more about that. But that's going to vary based on how personal it is. There are some types of portals. And of course, you can put things into Dropbox, even and put passwords on them. There are a few ways to go about that to lock things down. And so that will vary based on your industry. I would say to definitely ask around and see what other people may be using. But it could be as simple as putting a password on the form itself. And that's something you can simply do in Adobe. Really, really simple and easy to do, to say, hey, here is a link, but you have to have this password to access it. And then that second part of the question was, do I suggest doing a phone interview to complete the form? Again, as a service-based business, that's going to be up to your industry. But I think it's best to have this conversation to make sure you're hearing the things they don't know to tell you. And again, when we think about managing expectations, setting expectation, understanding how pressing a thing is, or for me, and people always say that I talk myself out of money, sometimes what they're saying they need is not actually what they need. Sometimes the service that they're after is not actually the thing that they're after. And even though that may or may not benefit me personally, because I believe in servicing my customers regardless, whether that sends them somewhere else or not, I believe in preserving relationships. So if I have to say, hey, you don't need a website, actually, it sounds like you could do this with your MailChimp landing page. Like, you don't actually need to go out, get hosting, get a new domain and all of this to accomplish what you're saying you want to accomplish. Now, if you just want it to be in that way, then fine. But I do want to make sure I pause to tell you what you're describing is not the same thing. And so doing that in a phone conversation or in a video conversation gives you the opportunity to coach people and educate them, because again, that's not their job, to coach them and educate them about what it is that they might be looking for that's better for them, and gives you a chance to further show your expertise, and for them to see that, oh, they're not just going to take my money and give me what I asked for. They're actually going to take time and hear what I'm saying and make sure that I'm on the right path. And so I recommend doing some type of phone or, conversation aloud for that purpose, but also so that you can hear any red flags or hear kind of in between the lines, hear them going on about, what it is that they're describing. That's something that works very well for me. And it could very well just be because I'm a marketer. And when people are trying to tell me what they want their brand to be like, they usually tell me in the things that are unintentional. And so if you're in that type of industry, I would say, sure, by all means, do have that conversation. If you feel like, nope, if they fill this out, I have everything I need, I don't need to talk to them, or I want to create a process that requires less human interaction, which is fine, depending on what it is, because I do have Elevation Academy. It's an online service. People don't have to talk to me. You get in there, you fill out your information, you pay your money, you have access, you do what you want to do. You never have to know who I am. Sometimes the process should be like that. So if it's one of those, then sure, you don't have to be doing it out loud. So as where we were was, what tools do you currently use? And you want to think about that. And then you want to figure out why. Then the next question that I want you to think about answering is, do those tools have integrations that matter to you? And what I mean by that question is, if you are using Calendly like I do, Calendly has a Zoom feature. It always has had a Zoom feature. It's not new to our current situation. But I know that because, again, this has been my life for a while, where, in digital marketing, I don't have to have the people who are in my city, or if I'm traveling or if I'm doing something, I needed to go and speak somewhere, but I still want to have that discovery meeting. I don't want to limit, when people can schedule. That Zoom capability is there. That integration matters for me because the part that I needed to automate for that purpose was to not have to go back and forth. One, not have to go back and forth in emails and say, well, great, I would love to meet with you. When would you like to meet? Oh, anytime is good for me. Okay, well, great. What about Tuesday? Not Tuesday. Okay, well, you just said any day was great for you. Okay, so about Thursday. And so all that back and forth, I had to eliminate that because that takes time out of my day. So I created the Calendly link. Here you go. Here are the days I'm available for this type of meeting. You can schedule yourself. And then I gave them options. Would you like this to be in person at my location? Would you like this to be a Zoom meeting, which will schedule them on Zoom itself? I don't have to go in and turn it to a Zoom. It'll do it all by itself. And someone asked, I'm saying Calendly, so Calendly. So like calendar, drop the R and add Lee. Calendly. Oh, I could type it, couldn't I? That would be so much more helpful. There you go. All right, so that having that integration was helpful for me because that mattered. It would link to my Gmail and schedule it itself. All of that I needed to happen. It also works with Zapier and all these other kinds of apps that help me automate my process. Then another question that you may want to ask yourself, that's an important question to answer, is does your client have access? Now, first, do they need access? If they don't, then okay. But when you think about things like Slack, which is basically for communication and helping keep people on the same page as things move forward, there are a lot of integrations there with Dropbox and Google and all of these different things to make the conversation relevant and happen there, or Asana, which is a task organization tool. So if all of those things can work there, you actually can have it where your audience has access to a Slack channel where you can talk to them there instead of having to do an email every time or having to do a meeting every time. And so you want to answer for yourself, is there something that my client can have access to that matters to me? Now, another example of that for me is when I do social media management and I want people to be able to see their social media in advance so they can tell me if they have any issues with what I've said to their audience, I need to be able to share that with them. They don't have direct access, but I can send them a link for them to view it. Someone also asked here if I personally use HubSpot. I do not personally use HubSpot. I do know a lot of people who do use HubSpot, and it is very effective. So again, it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Also, it could depend on size. My firm is not huge, and so I'm still good at, myself and one other person, still very good at fielding the people who come our way. We don't actually do a ton of marketing. So most people come through us through connections and things of that nature. So I have not moved into a CRM tool like HubSpot. And that's, again, just by virtue of the fact that that's how I'm running my process. HubSpot is a great tool. It does a lot of things. It has a lot of integrations. And I definitely think it's worth trying out. And that's why they have free versions. So I encourage you to do that if you feel as though it would be helpful. So then the next question we want to answer is, how are you currently getting the money? How are you getting commitments? How are you getting the money? How are you explaining to people what they will get? So this is all a process for figuring out what works for you, what you're currently using, if it's effective, and if there is overlap. And that's really what we're trying to figure out. And so if you needed a space to do that, this is the page there for vetting that. So as you think about your process and you're like, okay, I use, for instance, for me, Asana, right? Okay, I use Asana, great. What actually matters to me for using Asana? Some days I actually ask this in real life. Why am I still using Asana? Because it costs me quite a bit of money to use. But then I remember I have a virtual team. Most people I tell them all the time, you can work wherever you have Wi-Fi. I don't care where that is. As long as you get the job done, I'm not that boss, right? And that's because of my industry. In another industry, I would totally be that boss. But it matters to me that we can have projects, and it matters to me that I can give client access. It matters to me that I can connect this to our team Dropbox and be able to drop it right in without having to go over to Dropbox, download it, put it in there. I can just connect it, no problem. It matters to me that it integrates with Slack, which is where we communicate randomly when we have random thoughts. And so I want you to take time and think about what you are using What attributes that tool has that matter to you? That's very important because, again, you may recognize, oh, wait, these two things are doing the same thing. Or as you go forward in the process, you may realize, I need something for this. Now, going back, when you think about the steps and what you need to know, this tool is a question mark for that reason. Maybe you don't have a tool for it yet. So maybe in this space, you're saying needs research, right? So this is our way of figuring out internally, what is the process? What do I need to know? Do I have a tool that gathers that for me or that pushes them to the next step? And so we want to keep that in mind. So here we are, and I can see again, every time it pops up, there's a bunch of questions. A couple are coming to the chat, and I hope I'm answering those in as best real time as I can. We will have, of course, time for Q&A in just a little while here. Now, moving forward, so let's say you figured that out, right? You've thought about what your customer needs to understand about their journey in that process. You've mapped that out for yourself and for them. And then you have done this internally. And this is where we are in adoption and migration. I've thought about what it is I need to move this forward. Every single little step. Don't skip a step. Do not skip. If one of those steps, like I did for the client, is acceptance, you would be surprised how many people I send an estimate to and they never press the button accept. And then they look at that and go, oh, I have to accept it. Oh, okay. And so you sometimes have to say every little step. So we've gone through that. We figured out what tool do I need? What tools do I need to look into? What steps don't have a tool that maybe could, that I can ask around or research or do? And then the question is, what has to happen for you to commit, adopt, and migrate? Because just because a tool exists does not mean that you want to use it. Maybe that tool costs too much. Maybe it's a great tool and it's so great that they're very proud of it. And so they charge $1 million for it. And you're like, I don't see myself getting my money back. So you can't just say, oh, well, great, I'll use Asana. And then you realize for all the things that you want Asana to do, they're going to charge you $500 a month. That's a made up number, $500 a month. And if that is the case, does that actually work for you? When it does work, will you make $500? If not, that's not the tool for you maybe. And so you have to decide for yourself, what makes me commit to this process in this way? I figured out what I need. I figured out great tools. Does it come down to cost for me? Does it come down to how my team feels about it? Does it come down to how I get from this process to that process? When we're in service-based businesses, for a lot of industries, if you have clients you've been with for months or years, getting all of them turned over to something new could be like moving a mountain. And if that's something that you feel like may hinder the process, it's important to, second bullet point here, determine what the time frame will be for turning that over. So as a consumer, if you have ever gotten an email that says, hey, starting October 1st, think about star IDs. So in Alabama, star IDs are something that are going to be required for travel. I'm pretty sure this is for like everyone, but it's going to be required for travel in 2021. You have to have it by October 1st. They're migrating us into a system, a different system, though it's not virtual. They have to tell us before it's time. They can't come to October 1st and go, oh, wait, you don't have a star ID, you can't get on the plane. They've been spending a year saying, you're going to need this. These are the steps you need to take. Here is where you go. Here's how you do that. And so if you're having to do that for your internal audience or your external audience, please keep that in mind, because you may have to then determine a process for migration, a process for adoption, a process, for them to understand what they have to do or for you to understand what you need to do. So what time frame can you realistically accomplish this in? Is this a quarter thing, as it says on here, or maybe it's just a couple weeks? Maybe you say, hey, the third week in May is migration week. Day one, we're going to get all this information from here, export this information, get all the Excel documents or CSV files or whatever it looks like. Day two, we're going to put them all into the new space, make sure we run into no problems. Day three, we're going to manually go through and see what was missed. So you have to build a time frame around that so that you know for yourself, again, for levels of frustration and drama internally, what this looks like and if it's realistic. Then the question is, who needs to be involved? Now, if you are a solopreneur or you have a small team and you feel like, hey, it's really just me, I kind of make this decision. Once I know how it works, I'll kind of go through a day of maybe training with my team and we'll be fine. Great. If you have multiple people involved, if you have a board, if you have other entities that you collaborate with, maybe some of the tools you use are in place because you have partners or collaborators that also use the same tool. And so maybe you're sharing a space in some places. That's very possible. And if that's the case, you need to shortlist who needs to be involved in that process. Maybe you can't even commit to that process without making sure you won't lose a contract because of it, because they're not going to switch. And if you're switching, they're out the door. Those are things you have to consider when you're thinking about taking your process to a virtual or a new tool or a more efficient tool internally. There are other people you may have to consider. Then the question I always ask in anything marketing related, or anything in life, but anything marketing related, is what help do you need? Do you need help thinking through this process? Do you need help building this process? Do you need help with the integration of the process? If that answer is yes, who can help you? Maybe that's a marketer, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's Good Work Network, maybe it's SBDC, maybe it's who knows who it is, but you need to figure out who needs to help you. And then if they have a calendar, they can't help you on your time, that goes into your time frame. Great. Step one, we're going to do this. I'm going to work with this tool, but then I need to meet with this mentor, this organization to make sure I have all the functions or all the documentation or whatever I need to integrate that. And so make sure you're keeping all of that in mind. Now, then we turn our process outward again. Most of this is for us, right? Processes are very much self-serving, but the benefit of our process is for our audience. So now that we have figured this out, we know what we need to know, when we need to know, we know what their process is for step by step by step. How do I tell them about that? And so when we think about the example that I showed about website development, that's how I came to that, is what do I need to communicate? Like, how do I communicate this process to potential clients? And for some people, that's a filter. If I tell you it takes 10 steps to build your website, but the last person you talked to said, oh yeah, I could put you up a Squarespace in like 3 days. Maybe 3 days is what you're looking for. So I want to make sure that I determine how I communicate it and when I communicate it to you. When you think of the how and the when, I want you to understand that that means that there is work to be done. I had to take time and build that process, but then I had to take time and design the form, and that's PDF. It goes into the proposal information. So after we've spoken and I say the words, here's what's going to happen, I say it out loud. Then when I send the proposal or the estimate, I send that document with it. Here is a reminder of what I told you. These are the steps we will go through. With that proposal or estimate, I tell them, this is my projected timeline. Now, remember, in my discovery form, I asked, what is your expectation? When are you trying to have this done? If they said something that's completely, I can't do it, I make that known very quickly. Hey, according to our workload, I couldn't start this likely until closer to like June 1st. If that doesn't work for you, I completely understand. If you're willing to, give me some time to be sure I can give this the energy and time that is required of it, then please, wait until June 1st. But in that proposal or estimate of saying, here's how much it costs, here's how much what you're going to get, I also say, here's the process and here's the projected timeline. So there's a form that I did not include in this that gives who it is, who it's for, what the project is, what their requested completion date is, and what our projected timeline is, what we're pitching that we can actually do, how quickly. I always too have to remind people, as I do on that particular document, that a lot of this, for instance, website development, is dependent on you giving me certain pieces. I could, I will not write your bio for you. I may help clean it up, but I don't know your story. I don't know how you started. And if you never give me a bio, your About Us page is going to have the developer language lorem ipsum. It's going to say nothing. And I need you to know that this is how this will go if it worked well and you gave me what I asked for in the time that I asked for it. But because it's a type of service that is heavily dependent on my audience to do what I've asked, I have to give them that map to say, hey, you see these step 3, 4, and 5, they involve you. Now, after that, it's all mostly on me, but I can't get there without you. And that's what I have to communicate. And that's how I've decided to do it. Then the question is, how do you onboard new clients, right? If you said yes, and that's a part of my onboarding process, but if you've decided this is my process, do you show them the process? Is that what you do? Do you tell them internally what's happening? How do they check the status of that? Have you built in certain status points of saying, like, for instance, with social media management clients, after we've been doing this for 3 months, which usually is about how long it takes me to start doing it well. The first couple of months are like, okay, let's try out what's happening. Let's see if this is working. Maybe you hate that. Maybe your audience loves it. Maybe there's some coaching there. What do we need to do? Usually about 90 days in, I found a rhythm that I think is going to work well. So at that 3-month point, I have to pause and say, all right, we've been in it for 3 months. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I've learned from you. Let's make sure that we can keep this pace and then determine what are those things that are going to tell us if this is successful. What are we going to measure by? That's a part of my process. And so I let them know, when you sign up for a year of social media management, we're going to talk at 3 months, we're going to talk at 6 months, we're going to talk at 9 months, and we're certainly going to talk at 10 months because you have to give me 60 days before you decide that we're not renewing. So I've built that in because it's not their job to come and say, hey, don't you want to talk about how this is going? If I want them to have a great experience, it's up to me to do that. So then the last question on this slide is, where can you communicate the benefits to the customer? So here's the thing, and this is the thing that I've not focused entirely on, but here's the thing that I want you to consider. We know the benefits for us internally. We talked about it externally. It's about user experience. It's about making sure it actually gets done. And it's about having a great product or service at the end. Then the question is, how do you want to communicate? I'm trying to read the chat at the same time. Where can you communicate those benefits? Now, it could be on social media. Maybe you say, easy, maybe words like easy or effective, or, giving you time back in your day by providing this thing for you. There is a benefit to how we do this. And we want to make sure that that is something that you are communicating. Now, in our workbook, you want to brain dump the answers to those questions. Where are the benefits of this process to my audience? Why would this matter to them? I recommend that when you do decide to integrate new tools, you decide to even just change the process, you can decide to ask someone to be a guinea pig for you. If they've been a client of yours for a while, I recently did this, and he needed a new website, and I was like, hey, I'm so glad you need a new website. I will give you a slight, not much, but a slight discount if you will be a guinea pig for me, if you will give me your feedback, your honest feedback, and I knew he would do that. I need to know the benefits of this process. How is this better for you than it might be with other people, or it might have been with me before? And then I want to know what mediums most make sense for my audience. Is it a graphic? Isn't it email? Is it a video maybe? Maybe I need to do a welcome video. Maybe I need to do a video before they come into the Slack channel. What does that look like? And what's the best medium for me to make that known? And then also, when I'm marketing this process, is how is this process a competitive advantage? When you're doing the benefits, that's when you can say, okay, let me ask some questions about your experience. Can you tell me about a time where you've gotten a website done? Or if you know someone who's gotten a website done and it sucked really bad, can you tell me about that? Then you glean out of that what you need to know that says, you know what? I don't have that problem because of this. It's a benefit of my process. So try to figure out and nail down what those things are. And then the question here is, what keywords and images speak to this advantage? Now, this is me putting on more of a just general marketing hat and saying, yes, I know. And in this conversation, like in our workshop here, yes, I know and understand the benefits, but are there keywords like easy? Are there keywords like efficient? Are there keywords like let's see what else. Budget friendly. Like if now I've taken out the fact that you have to print a 100-page document and just made it where you can sign it through Adobe Sign with no problems, you don't have to do that. If I've taken out that you don't have to go and pay for someone to be the to witness and stamp and whatever, like you can do that in our office. We actually work with someone. What are the key words for your industry, for your service that you need to be saying regularly in your marketing communications that will trigger your audience? And a lot of these are very industry specific. So for me, it may be things like, you know, efficient, or because my sale is always that if you could have time to do this, you likely would, and maybe you do a great job. The problem is you don't have the time. I'm not using any tool everyone doesn't have access to. But if your job is not marketing, you probably need somebody else to do that for you because you have a job. That's not it. And so for me, keywords always come down to the fact that you're having to take time out of your day, out of your processes to do something that you don't know. And so that could be the case. Also, it asks here, what marketing channels could or should I use? Is this going to be social media? Is it email marketing? Is this going to be a fillable form? Is this going to be a Zoom call? Like all of these questions are just about channels. What marketing channels is it an interest meeting? So maybe a part of my process is that I do some type of virtual interest meeting. I invite them to something like this and I say, I'm going to walk you through everything we do and make sure you know, and then you can tell me if you want to do it. Maybe that's a channel that you can use for marketing purposes. And then also, what is my definition of success in marketing my process? This is a question you should always ask in everything you do in life. How do I define success? And you need to define that before you get there. Otherwise, you will never consider yourself successful. What does success in this process look like? I know what the end result is. We've gotten the service to the person, but what else? Are they giving us a glowing testimonial? Am I going to say what's the conversion rate behind this lead page if I decide to say, hey, just want to let you know that I know that creating a website can be very difficult and challenging, but this is what we do. And I put that in a lead page. Do I say that I'm successful if I get 100 people to say, yes, I want your checklist of what to do before whatever? How do I define what the definition of success is for marketing this process? What will I use to determine both internally and externally? This is focusing on externally, but what can I determine is success for me? How can I make sure I know that before I make that commitment? Now, we have a ton of questions that I know we want to get to and answer. So luckily, we only have one more thing that I want to say, and then I left a ton of room for questions because I know that there will be many. Now, also, let me say this, in that workbook, there's a basic list of tools that I personally use. I'll pull that up once we get into Q&A and I pull off of sharing my screen. But there are tools there. And again, I wish that I was capable of telling you every single tool and everything that it does, but I just wanted to give you a guide of things that I use for my firm, things that we have tried out. This can be very industry specific. For instance, I have accountant clients who use some other portals of some sort that are not Dropbox and where you have to make a login and all this kind of stuff. Those are things I'm not personally familiar with, but they do exist. So most of the tools that I put into that workbook are going to be team management or invoicing, or maybe some that do a little bit of everything. But before I go and answer questions, I do want to remind you of a few things. Process is secret sauce. And I mean that in two ways. Yes, because it can be competitive advantage, but also because everyone's secret sauce is a little different. And back to what I said in the beginning, it's important to remember that your process is your process. It is not going to directly mimic anyone else's process. There's going to be something different about it. It's kind of what people say in real estate. If I build the exact same house across the street from each other, the thing that's going to differentiate them is location. That makes them different. That's their secret sauce, is what the location is. For you, process is your secret sauce. It's going to be the thing that you craft that works especially for you, that tastes especially great for your audience. And so you want to remember that your secret sauce is really important. Also, your process is a living element. I would love it if after this workshop, you were able to go build some great, wonderful process and it worked wonderfully. That would be great. However, comma, that's not a real thing. And you will forever be working on your process. I personally am working on my process right now. Also, process will humble you. Y'all, and I'm from the South, can you hear it? Y'all, let me tell you something. Process will make you realize what you have not done correctly. It will also help you realize why you maybe gotten some of the issues you got. And that's something that I go through. It's like, okay, why does everybody keep coming back saying the same thing? It's like, well, maybe if you had a process there that told them that this thing would not happen, they wouldn't feel disappointed when they didn't get it. It'll humble you very quickly. And also, process is a best friend to profit. I need you to know that these two things hang out all the time. They're totally BFFs. They love each other. If you are able to get repeatable, efficient processes working for you in a virtual space, especially, and another thing that I'll add in a second, but especially if you can do that in a virtual digital space, not only does that meet the need of our current life, but also it is the best friend of profit. It makes sure that things keep moving. And usually the end of that rainbow is the pot of gold, right? So it's going to help you get to the money. And that's usually why most of us are in business. Or if it's not money, it's whatever is of value to you. For some of us, it's money, but it's donations. For some of us, it's email addresses, it's buy-in for people to give you more marketing collateral and more things. It could be a variety of things, basically. Let me also say this, and this is something that in a prior workshop that the last workshop we did with Good Work Network, we talked about determining whether what you're building is for right now or if it's for the long haul. I want to encourage you that yes, while you're thinking about making this all virtual and you're vetting tools and you're doing all of that, which is a great thing to do, that you figure out how you make this a long-term part of your business. Because the truth of the matter is that though we may not always be in a place where our world, our nation, our country is in pandemic mode, the digital world is likely not going away. And so if these things make you more efficient, if they make it easier for you, if maybe you thought you needed a brick and mortar and you actually don't because you can do all of this online, and maybe if you do have to meet, you have a space to do that, but you just kind of pay when you need it. There's so many things that you can build in for long-term efficiency, long-term progress, profit that will help your business. So do not just look at your services firm in a virtual space as a temporary fix. That's not just what we're doing. Yes, you need it temporarily, but how do you make sure that this stands the test of time? So when you're going through this process, when you're jotting these ideas, if you watch the replay, if you've been thinking about this for this entire hour and 21 minutes that I've been running my mouth, that, oh, this is great for pandemic time, but then once we open back up, we won't need this. Please watch this with a different mindset of, okay, yes, one day we are going to reopen, but how much of this could we have done before a person ever visits our location? How much of this could we have done online? How much of this can live on our website before they ever even have to do a discovery meeting? Maybe there are things we can put up. Maybe our frequently asked questions aren't so frequently asked because we had not been considering the process. Maybe those forms that we're doing can exist there. Maybe I can say, hey, it's great. I'm so glad that you came to this webinar with us today. If you go here and download these forms, you'll have everything you need. What is it that we can take into our long-term businesses and set ourselves up for success? Someone just asked this question. This is how you can get in contact with me. I hope Hermione is on her way back right now. This is how you get in contact with me, and let me walk you through this slide real quick. Business, 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 business. Me personally, and this is not like, you know, my Gmail account, but this is if you want to see me in these Instagram streets, you are welcome to. That's my life there. This QR code I did put, if you don't care to have to screenshot, take a picture of all of this, you can point your mobile device at this QR code, and please feel free to go straight to this page that will tell you all of these connections, allow you to sign up for an email list and all of that kind of fun stuff. So before we get into Q&A, I do just want to thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.